Welcome back. Another episode of Your Circle of Influence. I am one of your co-hosts, Dr. Monica Obando.
And I'm Amy Walker. And today we are talking about your comfort zone, your courage zone, and your growth zone. Years ago, someone told me, and I don't remember who originally said this. It's one of those quotes that you say for so long, you feel like it's from you.
Yeah.
But it was that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone.
Yes.
And I remember hearing it and being like, I embrace this. I'm going to live this. I'm going to let this be my mantra. And
yes.
for years and years and years, I've told myself life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. But as I've gotten older and more experienced in life, I've realized that there is actually purpose behind your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
There's purpose beyond and what comes beyond it. And it's not all just chaos outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
So I wanted to just kind of have a conversation about this today and understand that your comfort zone has purpose. So Monica, what does your comfort zone, first of all, look like? And what does it do for you? It's positive. Let's not focus on the negative yet. Let's focus on the positive.
Right. So my comfort zone gives me a chance to breathe, kind of get myself together, get grounded, to also kind of soothe myself. Right. So when I go back to what's comfortable, what's familiar, then it's kind of like a self-soothing mechanism to like, okay, everything's fine. Nobody's died. Everything's good. Get yourself together. So that's one of the positives of a comfort zone.
Yeah. Your comfort zone is rest.
Yeah.
Your comfort zone is peace. Your comfort zone is solidifying what you've done as you've been out in the growth zone and then kind of coming back together. It's like warriors have to have time to recuperate in between their battles.
Yes.
And your comfort zone is where you go to recuperate during your battles.
The
way that comfort zone shows up in the negative is when your comfort zone becomes your captor. And so you don't step beyond and you don't move beyond and you just live in this space of sameness and always doing the things that you're currently capable of doing because there's no growth that happens inside of the comfort zone, but there's a ton of replenishment and recuperation, recalibration that happens. But the growth, you have to step outside in order to go there. Which is what I have learned is there's an in-between phase that's a smaller phase between your comfort zone and your growth zone. And it's the courage zone. And the scariest step is actually stepping into your courage and saying, I will leave this comfort behind and I will step into the unknown. And it's what happens if they say life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, the courage zone happens right before you hit the edge. And that's the scariest part. In years past, in my growth, I've had a few years where I've spent most of the year in my growth zone and courage zone and very little inside my comfort zone. And this has been one of those years, but in most of my life, I like to be in my comfort zone and then go out and then come back and then stretch further and then come back and then stretch further. But it's like every time I come back into my comfort zone, that zone has actually expanded. And it becomes the courage zone where it's like the talking yourself into getting outside of what's comfortable, that it gets a little bit more elastic, like it's easier to move through. Whereas at the beginning, it feels like a brick wall that you have to climb in order to get there.
Right.
So Monica, I'm curious, like when you get to that point where you've been comfortable for too long and it's time to move, how do you get through that courage zone? Because I think that's the scariest part is like pumping yourself out.
That's a great question. I think that for me, the way that I know that it's time to get out of that comfort zone and into my growth zone is restlessness. There's a restlessness that happens and impatient with nothing in particular and everything. Which I guess is how I would define restlessness. But also it
is also how I would define PMS, but restlessness is good.
Yes, that too. And there's a certain sense of like the things that I try to invent as a proxy for whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing, divinely instructed, those things don't work. And I'm like, yes. I can't distract myself with this other thing. If it would have worked, I would have distracted myself. But God's like, no, and no to that one too.
Yeah.
Can we be about my father's business, or are you still gonna keep yourself distracted? And then it's like this exercise in futility. It's like, okay, fine, I'll gird up. You know?
So for me, it's I go through divine restructuring, and I think this is because I lack intuition and obedience in some ways.
Yeah.
Because when it's time for me to get out of the comfort zone, it's like God starts pruning. And
Mhm.
it's like, I'm going to prune this that's no longer serving you. I'm going to prune this. And it feels like everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
So my comfort zone becomes uncomfortable.
Yes.
And now I will move. And so when that's it for me, it's like when the comfort zone becomes uncomfortable, I know
Yeah.
that's calling for more.
Yes. That's a
Um,
perfect way to say it.
Now, one thing that I have found is that the more that you cross back and forth between the two,
Mhm.
the less fear that the courage zone holds. And so it becomes, instead of, I'm going to use a really weird visual, but if you look at like the US's immigration policy with Mexico in the like the 70s, it was people were coming as migrant seasonal workers and then they were going back home. And then they
Mhm.
were coming as migrant seasonal workers and then they were going back home. It was
Mhm.
when we closed the border that people were now coming and staying, and we had the immigration problem. Whereas before that, it was really providing the labor force that we needed and providing the income source that they needed. And
Mhm.
so when you have a closed border zone, that's where things get pent up on one side or the other. So you stay outside in the growth zone and you stay there for so long that you end up with adrenal gland fatigue, and you
Right.
end up out, and you end up needing to come home and have a long time to recuperate
Yeah.
because you were afraid that if you went back into your comfort zone that you would get stuck there and be a captive there again.
Mm.
Or if you stay inside of your comfort zone and you don't go into the growth zone again, you become that captive.
Yeah.
So making that like a really like an open door zone where it's like you can walk through into the growth zone at any point in time. And when it gets too chaotic and you need to come back into the comfort zone, you just come back and then you go paddle boarding, or you lay in bed and watch Pride and Prejudice, the BBC version, all day, or whatever it
Right.
is, whatever it is that you need to do to just kind of draw in and soothe and replenish.
Mhm. I really like that.
I
Um,
will say,
mhm.
having spent more time outside of my comfort zone than normal this year, I have learned some lessons. One is that you do not die in the growth zone. The zone does not equal the danger zone. It
Mm.
is going to stretch your muscles,
Yeah.
and you are going to have that soreness that, like, when you do a real good workout and your
Yeah.
muscles are torn, you're going to feel that way, sometimes with your energy and sometimes with your your pace, but that's why we have rest days.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that there's something to be said about, I think sometimes we underestimate what we're capable of. We tend to put a limit to the limit. I mean, we tend to shortchange ourselves in terms of what our limitations are. And you're far more capable. This should go in one of those the listen of the the lessons that I learned from my fitness journey. Because there
Yeah.
have been times when I'm like, I don't have one more rep. I don't have one more set. I don't have one more drop of sweat to drop on this thing. It's like, nope, yes, you do. You do have one more. And so the growth zone allows you to see that your limits are actually way beyond what you anticipated, that you have much more capacity, that you have much more bandwidth than you give yourself credit for. And the only way that I know how to test that is by pushing beyond those limits, right? It's like
Mhm.
that Audre Lorde quote: "Only you only know how far you can go by going too far."
Farther than you thought you could. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Love it.
Mhm.
All right. Well, my friends, we appreciate you being here with us, and we would love to hear. Here's my question that I want to ask each of you, and I want you to leave an answer.
Yes.
If you were being brave, what would you be going after between now and the end of the year? If you were being your most courageous self, if you were completely ready for that growth zone, what would it be? we would love to cheer you on. So share with us, connect with us. I'm at Amy Walker Coach on Instagram. Monica is at Monica Ogondo, and we just adore our listeners, our viewers, and hearing and getting to interact and meet new people and expand our circle. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, everybody.